Okay, today we'll look at John chapter 1, verse 14. I'll actually break this into a couple different parts, so we'll have John 1:14 today and John 1:14 also tomorrow. Let's read the verse here. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Well, the first phrase there says, and the Word became flesh. In the beginning, the Word was with God, the Word was God, but now something new takes place. Now the Word becomes flesh. God became a man. One of the arguments I've heard from some co-workers, Muslim co-workers in the past against Christianity, many Muslims, they'll argue that a man cannot become God, and they're right. But then I say, let me ask you this, can God, who is all-powerful, become a man if he wants to? And the answer is, of course, yes, he can. So Jesus was not a man who became God. He is God who humbled himself and became a man. Jesus is the Son of God. He is part of the Godhead. He is God. He has been from the beginning with the Father. He was there at the creation of everything. Nothing was made without him that was made. He was involved in the making of everything. He is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-everything. Yet he agrees to become flesh. He is this limitless one, and he agrees to be placed into a very limiting and narrowing circumstance, becoming a vulnerable human baby. Flesh is kind of vulnerable, it's precarious, it's very fragile and easily broken, easily damaged, easily destroyed. So imagine omnipotence clothing itself with frailty like this. Imagine omnipresence limiting itself to a very small time and place. So in this simple phrase, the Word became flesh, we see this amazing humility of God. Over in Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, we see Paul talking about this humility of the Lord. He says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. So when the Word became flesh, it was an incredibly narrowing and diminishing experience for him. It was a condescension. It was a stooping down. It was a humbling of himself to be with us. And he is our pattern, as Paul says to us, let this mind be in you which was in Jesus Christ, who humbled himself. Let the mind of humility become your mind. Let a lessening of the self become your pattern and your way of thinking. He let go of the idea of people thinking highly of him. He became of no reputation. He became to us a servant and not a master. If an earthly king did something like this, that'd be something special. We'd be amazed. But, for the King of Kings to do this, wow, it's incredible. And he tells us to imitate him in this, to be willing to step down, to become less. And not only did he humble himself concerning his reputation, not only did he give up the desire to be liked and admired, but he also humbled himself to the point of obedience to death, and death on a cross. Can we do that? I think we're called to that. 1 Peter 2:21, he says, for to this you were called, talking about suffering for Christ, to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps. And so I'd like to ask, do we care what people think of us? Are we offended if people think small thoughts about us? Do we waste any sentiment on concerns about how other people see us? See, that simple phrase, and the Word became flesh, contains so much by way of describing the incredible condescension that Jesus voluntarily experienced for us. He was way up there, right? He was way up there. But in order to reach you and me, he brought himself way down here where we are. And when you put the first two phrases of this verse together, you get this beautiful picture. It says this, right? And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. See, then you put them together, you get that full picture of his stooping down for our sakes. He became flesh and dwelt among us. He became flesh and lived with us. And he fulfilled the words of the prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah 7:14, it says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." And we know the name Emmanuel, right? It means God with us. He came and dwelt among us. The Word became flesh and lived with us. We couldn't possibly reach him, so he came down to us. He became flesh. With all the weaknesses and limitations of a human body, he experienced all that, right? And he lived among us as one of us, experiencing every pain and difficulty of our experience. And to live among us carries another implication too. One of the difficulties in planting churches among certain people groups is that they can be difficult to live with. We were blessed in our ministry to be part of a church plant in the Philippines among a village of Bajau people. And it's not an easy thing, even for local Filipinos there, to live among the Bajau people. They're very different people. They have one-room houses built on bamboo stilts above the ocean water. Their personal hygiene is lacking a lot. They actually smell very bad. Their bathroom is the water beneath their houses where their kids play and swim. They have no sense of privacy when it comes to the things that men and women do. They don't care if when they think it's time to do that thing, they'll do it no matter if there's big crowds around, if they're in the middle of a park in a big city, or if they're in their own little house with 4 families. They don't care who's around, they just do it. They're very unpredictable, kind of wild, especially the men. So it's difficult to find the kind of person who can live with them and sacrifice their own comfort in order to reach the Bajau people. And we were blessed to have a really great pastor there among them. I can imagine, even though we are so amazing and lovable compared to that it could have been very uncomfortable to live among us like Jesus did. If the Bajau people seem hard for us to live with, imagine what mankind was like for the Lord to live with. And we'll come back to this tomorrow. God bless you.